Okay, you're on. Just went through your website and watched a lot of videos and read again your proposal. These dresses look super beautiful.
Yes, I can actually give you a tiny sneak preview because I am in the process of finishing the second dress.
Okay, wow.
And it was supposed to premiere at the Philharmonie in Paris in March, but it was of course cancelled because of the situation. So nobody has probably seen it yet. And I just unpacked it a few days ago. So if you would like, I will just...
Yeah, of course.
Want to see it?
Wow.
So this is the second one.
Wow.
I'm not sure if you can see it properly on the screen.
Wow.
So what this now is the top part, but it's the We Are We project is began with that one first dress and composition performance, but already while creating it, I realized that there's so much stories that want to be told, and it's such a beautiful process to connect those stories into one narrative that I will definitely continue. So this is the continuation. And,
Wow. Can you tell a little bit about the project? How did it start? And
yes, I will tell you.
you stitch it, right? You stitch it yourself.
Yes, I stitch it myself.
Wow.
I wouldn't be able to throw it into the washing machine. My stitching is not very professionalized. Yeah, but it's good enough, and I'm learning, and I had a beautiful assistant who helped me to really get into the first steps of putting fabric together. She was very, very foundational in developing this whole work, because before I began it, I didn't even know how to put a button back on, you know. I never had a needle in my hand in my whole life for nothing.
What made you want to start doing it?
I had an invitation by the National Gallery in Singapore to create a performance, and very often my work is created in close relationship with the space where it's supposed to be performed or presented. So I had a couple of weeks in Singapore where I was just, because I didn't have any connection, I literally only knew that Singapore was a country and that it was quite young. I didn't know anything else about it.
Okay.
And
you never were there before?
I was never there before.
Okay.
So I went quite open-minded. I just wanted to see how I would feel there and what kind of people I would meet, and what would maybe appear for me to develop into a project. So I was just really spending some time at the museum that is very impressive. Singapore builds on a scale that is totally foreign to the European cityscape, because buildings there really are can be very futuristic. And this museum, for example, I don't know if there's any museum that is as large in Europe as that one. It feels as if it's like a full day journey to just walk from one side to the others, and it has several restaurants inside and underground floor. So it was huge, and I just spent much time to understand this humongous structure. And then I was walking around on the streets, just having coffees, speaking to people. And then one day, someone mentioned that there were women from China who in the 20s, 30s used a certain regulation that was put out by the government of Singapore, because Singapore had too many men at that time. Most of the immigrants who arrived were men. So for some time, there was a ban. No more men were supposed to arrive. So women from China used that hole to make their trips to Singapore and to establish their own lives there. And many of those women actually come from the silk production industry in China. And when they arrived in Singapore, they formed sisterhoods and promised each other that they will never marry and that they will also never prostitute themselves. But they, of course, had to make a living, so they started to work on construction sites. Much of what is still the founding walls of Singapore was built by women from China. And in order to not be to be visible on the construction sites, they were wearing red hairbands. And I was very fascinated by that story. So usually, like, I just tap from one link to the next, like a treasure hunter. So one day I'm in a taxi, and I asked the taxi driver if he knows about those women, and he tells me that he was actually raised by one of those women, because when those women were too old to continue work on construction sites, they very often went as caretakers to families and took care of the children. So he told me about her, and he tried to make a link for me to meet her. I found an elderly home that was actually quite sad, where they had told me there were also still 2 of those women living there, because now they are already in their end 90s, so almost 100 years old. And then I met 2 of them, but we were not able to communicate a lot. And all this just made me think about my own sisterhood, or what that means, how a narrative is created. And also I was inspired because those 2 women who were living in that elderly home were working on patchwork kind of blankets. So all these bits came together. And then on my last research evening in Singapore, I was sitting in the museum, and I realized that this is what I want to do. I want to create a dress inspired by this story, but not telling their story, trying to tell other female stories and bringing them into one, and just to see and observe if maybe there would be similarities and how they would. It's a little bit like a non-linear storytelling. So I didn't want to write a book that has a beginning and an end, but just kind of patch together stories. And also body was important for me, so I wanted to wear it. And I have Japanese background, so I remembered Boro, which is a Japanese tradition of patching pieces of fabric together. And this is how the project began. So I first started writing to 10 women who I was close with, if they would participate. And they all said yes, and they all connected me to other women as well. And suddenly the first dress was, actually I forgot, but it was close to 50 or 60 women who participated. And suddenly the first dress was ready, and I performed it in Singapore.
So you just asked those women to send you pieces of cloth that were dear to them, or that?
Yes, I actually, yeah.
The request.
I asked them if they would send me something that's meaningful to them. And of course, I also told them the story. I told them that I'm planning to make a dress. I'm planning to write music for the stories that are given to me. And so the stories that came, or the fabrics that came, were all very precious to the women, because it was also I feel that for everyone, including myself, it was also kind of a ritual of sending something on to a new journey or something. So if you like, because I just have it here, I'll show you that. Then after I began the process, it was a bit like Christmas, because almost every day I would receive packages like this.
Wow.
And then this is something that I will have not yet woven into the new dress, because after the cancellation I was kind of, I was just a bit in a shock and I stopped working on it, but I will continue now. And then something like this will be inside,
Wow. And
together
you
with
know,
the letter.
explaining what's the story beyond this fabric.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So that's pretty much it. And then and now the second one is almost ready. I'm sad that I cannot show you the first one. The first one is actually still in Paris because the transport already happened. I wanted to exhibit the first dress in Paris while performing the new one. So
That's the second dress.
first one.
That's the second dress.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the first one in a video on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Very nice evolution of a process.
Thank you.
And can you tell a little bit about the proposal to frame, because it's something different, right? It's an sound work.
Yes, but it is also it's in a way also related to the notion of sisterhood, but taking a different angle at it, because generally I'm very fascinated by research in the fields of physics, biology, and also to see how those researchers are more and more coming into alignment with a philosophical storytelling that we might have concerning what it means to be alive and to be a human being. How do we interact with what's around us? And so there's this concept or reality, one reality within which there is no time, or something that we could call a one-timeness. So everything happens at once. Everything is just existent simultaneously. And but because we are human beings and we're having this experience, we have time and space to experience what we experience. If we didn't have time and space, we wouldn't even hear music. And I am also very fascinated by learning more about the planetary constellations. I'm not so interested in astrology in the sense of, next month you're going to win the lottery, not in this sense, but more like how do the planets actually circle within our solar system? What are the relationships, the difference in speed, in size? How do they influence each other? What was the constellation in certain moments, and how does it change in relationship to my life? And bringing all of this together now for the project that I am now beginning for the framed process is that I have a very, very close friend who I usually refer to as my sister. Her name is Mariana Hahn, and she's a wonderful artist. And I really feel that with her, we have bonds that connect us that are, to a certain extent, of course different, but to a certain extent, much, much stronger than you would have a blood relationship with somebody. And so we really have this bond. And I would like to know how the planetary constellation of her birth and the planetary constellation of my birth would sound together. And now I'm coming back to this concept of one-timeness. So I feel that sound is a wonderful medium to work with, because I can actually bring things that usually we would experience each separate. I can bring them into one into one sound structure. So for the frame process, I'm going to begin my research on the planetary constellations around her birth, around my birth. I will do a lot of research on how that constellation could have sounded.
How do
Then
you
I will build.
What's the connection between that
Yeah,
sound?
there are different ways. So one way is that everything that moves in a constant at constant speed
Mm-hmm.
can be calculated, translated into wave, and this wave can also be translated into a sound. So this is kind of abstract mathematics, but I still like it. So there's this component I can mathematically translate based on the speed of the rotation of the planets in our solar system. I can calculate a certain pitch. This is one level. The second level is that there is, of course, recordings of how it sounds in the universe, like actual recording that scientists are able to capture. This is the second level. And the third level is my intuition. I feel that in my ears are really sensitive, and sometimes I refer to myself as if I'm listening with my full body. I really do perceive a lot of sound, and I realize that not everybody hears so much, but I'm able to translate that, for example, into a sound of a violin, or a sound of a voice, or a sound of some tools that I might be using. So these are the three levels: maths, scientific recordings, and my intuitive listening to what I hear.
Wow. That's super interesting. And does your
my friend?
friend that you refer as a sister, does she have any role in participating in this process, or it's just
Not actively, but I will be in exchange with her.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Sounds
Yeah, I'm also really excited to see what will be happening next week, because for now, my my paper on which I don't know if that's going to work like this. So you see the paper is blank. Yeah. There is nothing on it yet.
Yeah.
So let's see how it's going to fill up within the process.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. I look forward to see, look forward for next week.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much for the talk.
Super. See you next week.
See you. We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Bye.